Kyiv is calling on the West to widen sanctions on Russian television personalities, accusing them of espousing propaganda and calling for violence against Ukraine. Within Russian borders, the Kremlin is maintaining tight control over the airwaves, with media outlets being used as a tool in Moscow's propaganda machine, pushing the narrative that the war is not only legitimate but also a military success. Separately, the EU has banned Russian outlet RT and Kremlin-controlled Sputnik from broadcasting into the bloc via satellite, cable, apps or the internet. Well, to discuss this and more, I'm joined for perspective by Vladimir Slivyak, co-chair of the Russian environmental group Ecodefense and winner of the Alternative Nobel Peace Prize. Vladimir, if you could just firstly tell us a little bit about your own background. You yourself were forced to flee Ukraine and you went to Germany. Tell us a little bit more about the background to that.
When last year repression of Russian government against civil society started to increase, it became almost impossible to work anymore in Russia. So I basically started to work in Europe with our German partners, and that's my story.
And you've spoken of your surprise at the depth of anti-war sentiment that we've seen in Russia over the past month or so. How has that evolved in recent weeks, or has it?
There was quite a lot of anti-war protests in Russia compared to what we've seen before. It was quite a big increase. In the last few weeks, there was over 15,000 of people arrested in Russia because they took part in the protest. Although it's a good question if that number of protesters can actually achieve a change. But in general, we haven't seen protests on that scale before in Russia.
And a lot of well-known personalities have left the country as well. Do you get a sense that people are starting to feel a bit more afraid of speaking out, or do you think that sentiment is still there in the country?
Well, definitely people getting more afraid than before, but it's not started just with this war. The repression started to increase. I mean, the repression of Russian government against civil society and the different types of activists started to increase about 1 year ago. And I think that was the preparation of a Russian regime for invading Ukraine. During last year, a lot of people left Russia from political opposition, also environmental activists, also human rights activists, and this activity just increased when the war started.
And in terms of the people who are still within Russian borders, where exactly are they getting their news from? The Kremlin, it's got a very tight control of the narrative of what people are seeing on their TV screens, what they're reading on the internet. Tell us a little bit more about that.
It's getting increasingly difficult to obtain independent information being inside of Russia because nearly every independent media shut down now. Social networks like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram all blocked in Russia. And actually, recently, Russian court declared Facebook and Instagram as extremist organizations. Means if you use it in Russia, you could go to jail for just opening these websites on your computer. So Russian regime is actually making all the difficulties it can to prevent people from independent information. But as far as I can see, a lot of Russians still get information from independent sources using VPN and other technologies in the computers. And some of the independent information still distributed in Russia. And it's actually, I think that's why people still go to protest, because some flow of independent information about war is still reaching Russian citizens.
And Vladimir, you mentioned some of the social media platforms there. What do you think the likes of Facebook, of Twitter, of even Instagram, what can they do to clamp down on the kind of disinformation that we're seeing on these social networks?
I think they should really track down Russian governmental propaganda and do everything they can to stop this propaganda. Because, well, maybe I don't know if you've heard of it, but Russians are not allowed to even say the word war. It's a criminal offense in Russia if you say the war. Russian government wants people to say spatial operation instead of war. But I think the Russian society is realizing, quite in fully realizing that there is a war going on and that government is basically lying to them.
And Vladimir, you've said previously yourself that sanctions are the only way to stop a war like this, but they don't appear to be deterring Vladimir Putin to date, do they?
I think sanctions are very important, and what is absolutely important today is introducing a full embargo on the Russian fossil fuel and the nuclear fuel. I can tell you, in last year alone, European Union spent about 100 billion of euro to buy fuels from Russia, and this money is exactly what fueling this war. So to stop the war and possibly stop bigger war in Europe, European Union have to introduce embargo on the Russian fuels as soon as possible. And I would like to see this embargo immediately.
That's your area of expertise, of course, having won the Alternative Nobel Peace Prize, partly for your work on mobilising opposition to the coal and nuclear industries in Russia. But tell us, how specifically can Europe reduce its reliance on Russian energy?
Well, first of all, Russia is not the only supplier of fuel in the world, but more important that the fossil fuel especially should not be just replaced by other sources. You have to deploy more renewable energy, and you have to you have to stop using fossil fuel. It's also good for climate, by the way. And you have to replace fossil fuel with renewable energy. And the faster it happens, sooner it happens, it will be better not only for climate, it will be better for peace, for stopping a war.
And Vladimir, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to leave it there. That's Vladimir Slivyak, co-chair of the Russian environmental group Ecodefense and winner of the Alternative Nobel Peace Prize. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Well, we can take a look now at our top story this hour. A display of unity, a ramping up of US sanctions, and a warning that NATO will respond if Moscow uses chemical weapons in Ukraine. But no tough new measures were announced following a trio of international summits in Brussels.